So, I guess we're live now. First time I'm doing this, so let's hope I figured all out the technical details correctly for this whole streaming thing with multiple cams and all that stuff. Anyway, so yeah, I figured it might be fun to, to kind of talk a little bit about my mixing work. And so this is kind of a first tryout of opening a repossession of some of my mixing work, and just to take a look around, and hopefully we'll get some people in the live chat to ask some questions, and if not, because I didn't promote this very well and it was very last minute and kind of a tryout. So if there's no questions, then I'll just come up with stuff myself, I guess. Okay, let's see. You can see my repossession now, I think, if all is going well, and my beautiful little head in the corner. Okay. So maybe first let's take a quick look at how this project is organized, so you kind of can follow where I'm at in the project and just get the basic idea of how I structure these things. I don't really work with a template, but as many other mixing people do, but I do kind of use the same layout for most of my mixing stuff. So what you see above here in this pre-master thing is just a bunch of groups all the way until here. They're kind of my stems, if you will, the sub-mixes of everything. So everything drum related will come back here, bass here, guitars, and so on. And then I've got a dedicated parallel mixing bus where we can talk about that maybe if there's interest or time to do that. So underneath, you'll find pretty much all the individual tracks for the instruments that route back, up here. This is all the drums. Let me turn off the automation to make it look a little bit less cluttered. Got a bunch of drums going on. They're always the same color for me, and they have been this color ever since I started recording when I was like 16 or something, and started out in Cakewalk 6. So, it's, I think, a good way to work like that, where you always organize your projects in the same way, so you can identify quickly where you are and just get to work instead of, having to find your way around the project, especially if you have a lot of tracks going. Okay, guitars, clean guitars, some effect buses, some fretless guitars for the feedback sounds, for the guitar solo, effects for the guitar solo, some vocals, just one main vocal, a bunch of backings by Robin, and some synths. So this is a relatively simple project. It's not very layered, and that is basically because with the latest Our Ocean record, we decided to keep things kind of small and intimate, and kind of direct instead of making everything too floaty and layered and spacey as the first album was. And that reflects in the track count. For example, really, there's just one lead vocal, for example, and that's quite rare in mixing projects I do. Usually there's at least a couple of different doubles for the main vocal. Anywho, so maybe I'll just press play for a minute, and once I stumble onto something interesting, we can maybe talk about it. I think there's some cool stuff there to unpack. So another thing, more on the production side of things, we decided to do for this record is have Robin, the bass player, serve a much bigger role in the sound department, and especially in the heavy sound department. And that reflects well in this song and in the intro especially. So maybe we'll just go individually through these bass tracks here a little bit and see what they sound like and what we did here. So okay, let's see what we have here. This almighty fuzz. I think the pedal that Robin used for this is called something like this, or literally like that. And I guess we tracked it 4 times. Mic is muted, is someone saying. Ah, that is, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, we'll walk into some of these little technical issues, I guess, as it is my first time doing this. My voice is going through the same project, so I guess I have to be careful not to solo tracks and then speak, because I will be muted. So I hope it didn't ramble for too long on a muted setting. Anywho, let's see. Back to the bass. So this is Robin's Almighty Fuzz. If You didn't hear me say that, which is a pedal, and I guess we quad tracked it to make it like super big, and it sounds like that. That is quite a cool sound. Did we do anything special to this? No, nothing noteworthy. Well, since we're on bass, maybe no. Let's stick to this section first. Let's see what the guitars are doing. So that really is not too heavy in the guitar department, right? Like it's much less. I think if you hear the song, you think it's much more guitar driven, but the guitar is actually not that overdriven or heavy. It's really the bass that does the work there. Let me at the same time try to kind of keep up with the chat here. And again, apologies, I'm new to this, so yes, sound is back. Okay, Yuma has a really great comment, of course. Yes. Okay, back here, what else can we show from this first section? Well, we have some of this noise that sounds kind of like feedbacking guitars that are feedbacking. Well, you know what I mean. The song starts with that sound. And that's just a bunch of fretless guitars. By the way, for those who don't know, like this fretless guitar that I have has this like sustainer pickup in it, which is essentially kind of an EBow, 6-string EBow. So that's why these notes ring out forever. Okay, and that is like, oh, maybe we can take a look at the drums, although, well, it's not anything particularly interesting happening during the intro, I guess. Why are Robin and Yuma watching? You're making me nervous. Go away. Okay. I'm going to keep playing the song and see if we stumble upon something interesting again. And I really should have done that view because you saw my big fat hat all the time. I'm realizing now. Yeah, so let's see. First of all, maybe something that I noticed myself now is that you will see a lot of red lights going off in my sessions, clipping lights. I don't give anything about that. Like I do take care of the gain staging thing, but digital clipping, like in the DAW, I really don't care about, as you can see. So let's see, do we have some interesting comments? I see some stuff coming by here. Yeah. Bart is here. Hey, Bart. Okay, well, maybe let's get into some drums. Drums are always interesting, like mixing wise, right? It's like kind of I think many people will agree, the hardest thing to mix in a rock setting. So let's see what we have. Let me first go through maybe the individual mic tracks, and then we'll see where they lead, like what group tracks they're in, folder tracks. So, the kick. And again, I have to be careful not to mute my vocal mic. Yeah. So first thing you will probably think is, wow, that sounds dull, and it does. But the thinking here was, well, we used two mics. We used like this really cheap, like it's one of these house brands of Thomann, the German music store. They have this T-Bone branded series of mics. And this is like this AKG knockoff mic, super cheap. We got it for Exhibius rehearsals back in the day. So we used that on the outside of the kick, and we used a Sennheiser MD421. It's kind of easy that I labeled the tracks after the mics, I guess. So otherwise, I definitely would have forgotten at this point. And this mic is inside the kick, and sounds like this, I guess. And there you will maybe think like, wow, that sounds the opposite of dull, and that has no low end at all. Well, the reason for that is to keep things as face pure as possible, if that's a word. I don't like to use many sources, like mic sources that cover the same area frequency wise, because that only invites face trouble. And yeah, so what I did here, if we just take a look at the EQ, it is basically just a crossover that I made myself in EQ. So this thing really has everything cut off above a certain frequency, the lower mic. The high one is the opposite thing going on. That. So that means that this low mic is really just only meant for the thump and the, you know, the low sound of the kick. And the other thing is just meant for the click. Together they sound like this. D112 knockoff, Yuma says. Yes, indeed. And maybe a little like extra information to that story. Like once we figured out that we liked that mic quite a bit for the sound we were going for, we figured, well, let's at least get the original AKG mic, you know, to kind of see, because if we like that sound, then surely we would like the more expensive original better, right? Well, not. So we got the mic and we kind of disliked it. So we went back to the super cheap €40, €30, whatever mic, and that's the way it is on the record. Okay, what else do we have going on? We do have a kick trigger, but only for the room sound. And this is something I started doing lately, kind of to... I guess I picked it up in some tutorials from Chris Lord Alge or whomever does it. Well, lots of mixers do it, I guess. But the point is that you don't have a sample replacement for the close mics, but just for the room sound, and it's blended in, I think, ever so quietly. But it does give some breadth, some length to the kick, so that's kind of nice. Anything else noteworthy to talk about here? Let's see what we have here. Well, this is just me drawing basically the frequencies of the kick. I remember this one needed quite a bit of shaping, as you can see, to balance, especially to balance out the low end. Like, let me just undo this and then go back and forth to see what the hell we did here. So let me first just like maybe, especially these two are, I guess, really prominent moves. Let me disable those and see what it sounds like. Yeah, that tends to happen quite a bit. You know, sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's like this, where the kind of the subs and the punchy area of the lows are not in balance well in the original sound. So you kind of have to fool around with that until it's kind of even. Otherwise, you have this problem where it might sound, the kick might sound great on one system, and then you move to another one and it disappears, kind of the low end thump. Yeah, it's kind of to balance it out. So as you can see, and I like to do that as much as possible, is treat things in groups. So here, there is some like filtering, but very simple here, basically only to create a crossover on the mics. But they're both going into the same track here, and I'm EQing and doing all the mixing work on that. And then even above that, the kick trigger room also goes to that. It's like some mixing again as well. And what do we, well, not much going on here. Blah, 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 blah. Let's take a look at the chat again. How do you mix the voices? Voices like singing voices, I'm guessing. Yeah, I'll get to that in a bit. Snare was also kind of interesting, I guess, in this entire session of the entire record's just an interesting sound. So before we go into that, little production information again. Yuma and I knew pretty early on that for this record we wanted like a not so ringy sound, kind of more compact and snappy sound. And as such, the snare is quite short, and that often presents a little bit of trouble. You know, if the snare doesn't have these nice ringing frequencies to them, which creates length and body that make it, you know, that give it space within the track. If it doesn't have that, it's kind of hard to bring it out. You know, you can fool around with compression and volume all you want, but it's just going to be a loud short snap, and it's never going to have body. So I had to troubleshoot some there and then come up with some solutions, I remember. So let's first see what I had to work with. Let's mute all the additional tracks. Maybe I'll just turn off all the effects so you can really hear what's going on. And I'll use the chorus. And the bottom mic. So let's see, what did we do here? Well, again, same thing, just some FabFilter to kind of prepare, you know, the source sound to sound a little bit better. This is mainly just corrective, I guess, some more body, some more thump in the really, so you hear some, you know, body in the attack. Less mids, well, it's all not incredibly interesting, and that probably didn't do that much. Here will probably be the bulk of the stuff that's going on. So maybe for this one, let's go quickly through the chain, see what it does, right? Let me just like press play and turn them on one by one. So this module, for those who are into Slate plugins, they will know it. It kind of emulates this, analog console. Not worth going into right now. This just puts, well, it's called Air, and it does pretty much what you think it does. It adds like some high sheen air to the sound. Doing the same here in this Revival thing, which is basically like a maximizer, sonic maximizer type thing. Then what do we have? Some EQ. Well, nothing interesting really here. It's all very simple moves, just some added 10K. And this obviously did the most of the bulk. Some pretty heavy compression there. And again, I'm doing this on the group track here, so doing this, the top and the bottom at the same time. Okay, yeah, then for the more interesting part, to create some length and some tone into this snare, because it doesn't, like I said, have a lot of ringy harmonic type stuff going on. Again, if you listen and you try to listen for that, there's some tone going on, but not a lot. Especially if you put this into like the context of a whole mix, it's kind of gonna disappear. So I think, again, like I said in the beginning, I haven't opened this project for quite a bit, so I hope I remember all this stuff correctly. But I think I just, I made a send from the snare top microphone. So this is essentially just a copy of the snare top mic. Then first, I isolated the area where any type of tone is gonna sit, basically. So there's no low end thump and there's no high end snappy information. There's just the middle part that would contain the tone. So that sounds probably very ugly on its own, but like this. So then I put on a Devil Lock, which is, I love Soundtoys plugins. This one is probably my favorite distortion plugin. I use it quite a bit. It's really good to crush and destroy things to death. But it's also pretty useful to destroy something to death and then blend it in ever so slightly. So you do use it in a subtle way in the context of the whole mix. So that sounds like this. And now you do hear some length, you know, it's at least tung, tung every time. But it's much too low. You know, it obviously sits still in that very narrow middle band where I, that I kind of shaped here in the EQ. So I did this whole super aggressive tilt thing in the EQ here, which makes it sound like this obnoxious sound. And that's one of these things where if you hear it like soloed, it's absolutely ugly and disgusting and almost sounds like something is going wrong there. It has this hissy type of very distorted quality. But in the overall, in the context added to these other, more normally mixed top and bottom mics, it just makes things come alive, I think. Maybe I can solo the snare. Yeah, let me just solo the snare and show you muted with that track muted and not. This is actually one of these things where you will probably notice it more if I played in the context of the entire mix, which is kind of interesting. That's a lot of times that's the case kind of with saturation-based effects. It's more clear what it does in the context of a mix because it tends to help to kind of, to give it a place in the busyness of all the other frequencies that are going on in a mix. So if I play this section, just complete all instruments and then mute this little ugly distorted snare, you'll probably hear the snare disappear quite a bit when I turn it off. So this is off. And on. Yeah, it's interesting to me. Well, before we move on, let's take another look at the chat here. What camera do you use? Looks really good. Yeah, right? Well, I've got this Nikon D3300 DSLR that I recently got like this USB thingy for so that I can use it as a webcam. Looks kind of cool. Use it for my lessons, guitar lessons and whatever as well these days, so it kind of looks professional. Oh, Robin already answered that. Thank you, Robin. Sennheiser 600. Yeah, is it 6,000, right? Or is it 600? I always forget. Oh, you're right, 600. Yeah. Yeah, I got these a while ago to kind of try and get better at headphone mixing. But I really haven't invested in learning how to do that yet. But I am very happy with them. Although I'm not mixing on them, I just am using them now, for the streaming thing. Otherwise, it might get really annoying if my mic is right here and I play the music over the speakers. Crazy how ironically adding more distortion does the work. Yeah, well, distortion, saturation, that type of thing really is your friend. It's one of the, in mixing, and in general life as well. No, it's like one of these things that, as most mixers discover it kind of last in their, kind of learning how to mix thing. First you kind of learn how to balance just with volume and some panning and all that kind of good stuff. Then, probably compression is next. To kind of get the dynamics to sit well and tracks play together more nicely. And saturation is kind of... it's kind of hard to get a grasp of at first. Anyways, I'm talking about my own journey mainly now. And while I'm saying this, what also comes to mind is that also might have been the result of the time I grew up in, which is, I started doing this digitally. I don't have the background of analog studio world. And in the beginning of this whole digital thing, there weren't many or any good plugins that simulated old school equipment, analog style equipment. And it's in those type of, in the hardware and in these days in the very well modeled software that all these like little harmonics and saturation occurs. So it's also something that due to that, in the time I grew up in and not, not having those tools available to me, that I just didn't know much about them. And so this is something you can really hear if you listen to the first Exvius record, for example. It might be balanced kind of okay, but it's really lifeless to me compared to how I mix now. And that's because there's almost no saturation going there. It's just very, very, very clean and digital. Yeah. So let's finish the snare thing. We do have a trigger for the close mic going on here. Let me just solo it for a bit. Quite ugly, but to me, when I'm searching for a snare trigger sample to blend in, I just go through the library and really listen to it in context of what it adds to the to the mic'd sound. And this it just brings a certain consistency to the snare that can be nice to have. You know, I don't think you will notice a really big difference with me turning it on or off in the mix. Let me show you. That would have worked as well, I guess. Yeah, it's, like I said, ever so slightly more consistent, you know, in the hits, and it's kind of nice. And if you're curious what I used, it's just this trigger Stephen Slade thing again with just a very, well, I guess I used 2 snares. Oh no, I muted this one, so only that one. Yeah, not too interesting there. For the snare trigger room, I did the same thing as above with the kick here. So this is adding a sample of a room sound. And again, it also, especially in this case, where what I was talking about before, where the snare is kind of short and snappy. Oh, yeah. I forgot to put the view back to the Reaper screen. Sorry about that. So let me go back to the trigger very quickly. This is what I used on the main trigger sound. And apparently that's the sound I used for to get some room sound going on. What was I saying? Yeah, short, snappy snare. So everything, you know, that whole distortion trick was to add some length and harmonics, but in a very different way than this is, right? But this still adding length and air and breath to the sound, so it doesn't sound so choked off. And this actually, even though it's not that loud in the mix, it does make a big difference to me. So let me mute that and play it for you. Or if I just solo the snare, it might be a little bit more easier to hear. You know, it's one of these things where if you don't take the time to listen to it, you might think like, huh, what does that do? You know, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're used to it and you mute it, you really miss it. Yeah, those type of things, those type of choices add up in the end, you know, and do make a big difference in the end result of the mix. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. Do we have something new there? Not yet. So maybe let me continue with these drums, see if I see something interesting. Well, toms, let's not spend too much time other than I like to cut them out, but you know, that is definitely nothing weird. That's what most people do, I guess. To make them really clean, you know, the bleed. As you can see visually, right? Overheads, well, nothing really special going on there either. I even muted the hi-hat. I see in this track, I guess it was just not needed. Oh, it was needed, but we have a fixed, I don't remember why that was needed. Do have a right microphone, total mic, which, you know, I sometimes use. It's in this case it was my Neumann mic that I'm talking in right now, my vocal mic, TLM 102, and we placed it kind of 2 to 3 meters, I guess, in front of the kit to kind of capture a total and mono specifically. Kind of nice to blend in, and you can treat it creatively, maybe like kind of fuck it up and overly compress it or distort it and that type of thing. I don't think I did any rigorous type of treatment on it here. I think it's quite natural if I remember correctly. Quite compressed. And that will probably be courtesy of this FG compressor here. Yeah, I can play a little bit with and without that. Maybe I'll solo the drums for now so you can hear it a little bit easier. It's one of these things that kind of ties things together, if you know what I mean. Like what sometimes tends to happen if you mic, it's so customary now to mic drums, to close mic everything, and to really not hone into any kind of room sound too much, and that tends to make the drums sound very not gelled together, where every sound is kind of seems like its own little island. And this obviously, because it's one mono mic, it obviously captures the whole drum kit. So just blending that in kind of gives it some, cohesive gelling quality. And it sounds nice. And then we got some rooms going on, one of which was muted. Was, I guess, not very useful. This other thing, we recorded these drums in not in a proper studio, but basically just in the space that Yuma rented at the time, and we kind of made it work for us, and that I kind of like that these days. For example, the first two Exvius records and the only two Exvius records, we recorded in proper studios, especially the second one, and that is cool. It's a nice experience, but I also really like to just go into spaces and that are not maybe meant to be a recording studio and just make it work for you, and that's what we did here. I'm looking at the chat, but I see it doesn't update. Is this still working, or is there like no one here to watch? Doesn't matter. Back to the rooms. So in the place where he lived, it was kind of like an office building, and you can see it in the music video for Face Them, the song. A lot of footage was shot there, and there was this like staircase type thing, just a hall with only stairs and concrete around. That sounded very reverby, of course, and but also very nice reverby. So we put some mics in that room, and I used them a lot, like in different places of the record. So let me see what they sound like. Really cool, especially now that I hear it back, like such a lovely reverb. It sounds like some type of proper, like drum reverb plugin you might get that's especially tailored, to drum rooms or something. But it was just a random staircase, but it sounds great. And if I put on the automation lanes that I by default have hidden, you can probably see that I like draw it in every now and then. So I removed it during the verses here and put it up again in the chorus and the bridge. I think that's enough drums for now. Yeah, so someone asked me about vocals. Let's take a look at vocals, even though they're not very pleasant for me to hear, as the guy who sang them. Like I showed in the beginning, it's a very simple setup, and that was one thing production-wise that we decided, again, like to keep things kind of intimate and small, even for the bigger songs like this one. And one of these the things that I really wanted to do is not rely on doubles for the main vocal to make it sound pro, if you will. Even though that is such, like, it does work really well to at least double yourself once and maybe twice and blend that in ever so subtly. Immediately, if you're not a great singer, it makes, you know, it's much less forgiving, basically, or more forgiving how you recorded your vocals. It immediately sounds more pro. But there's also something that goes away to me, and that, you know, it's this kind of, well, intimate quality, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I did really want to record this album with just one main vocal. That does mean I did have to do a lot of, like, automation, as you can see. So let's see what we have going on here. This is just the main vocal track right here. Then I've got quite a bunch of plugins on here, even though the ones that I title song, you can rename your plugin instances here. They are just song-based effects, like to make them sound lo-fi or something, you know, that come on maybe in one section of the song. So they're not really part of the default mixing chain. Anywho, maybe I can just turn off the effects, which are down here, and just go one by one through the plugins and see what they do. So this is me dry, maybe, well, what vocals are cool to look at? I don't know, just the verse. Oh, and let's solo them. Concealing tapestry, I've been hiding behind my angel, my friend that well, that sounds very dry. It's obviously sang pretty quietly. You know, I had to raise the volume here quite a bit. So first thing in the chain is just to kind of put quite a bit of compression on there, and that is probably also why I drew in this automation here, because this, if you draw it in here, the automation volume, it actually hits the compressor harder. So I'm guessing I drew this in to make it touch the compressor ever so slightly. Let's see. Tapestry, I've been hiding below my hand, but now your ragged seams concealing. Well, the quiet part doesn't even touch the compressors, and that part really doesn't do anything. So maybe as a contrast, I can play some chorus vocals with and without this compressor. I cast my pain aside. I cast my pain aside. So as you can see on the loud vocals, this thing is set pretty aggressively. If I saw it correctly, it went to 10 dB. So this kind of acts as if I was recording into an analog style compressor, which I didn't do. You know, this was recorded completely dry into my interface. So this kind of mimics as if I were, as if I would have sung into like an analog style compressor. Nothing really otherwise is happening. Then again, the kind of corrective, just prepping the sound type of EQ. Let's see what's going on here. Well, where to begin. First of all, low end muddiness in male vocals can really be ugly, and I really dislike it in my voice. So I'm pretty aggressive with what I do with the low end, and you will see later on, probably in some other plugins, that I will take out much more even. But anyways, just the low end is completely gone here. And these moves, well, this EQ is zoomed in pretty neatly right now. So this move, even though it looks big, is only 1 dB. So really, the moves you see here are not very, they're really quite subtle. This might be actually the most interesting thing that's going on here, which is it's set to dynamic EQ, which means that it's not doing this move all the time. It's just whenever this frequency range occurs, it will kick in. And this I did because I don't know why that occurred. Maybe it was just how my vocals sounded that day when I recorded this. But when I sang loudly, there was this really annoying, harsh upper mid spike in the sound. Let me see if I can find it somewhere. Maybe the part that I was just playing. It wasn't there because you see it doesn't do anything yet. Anyways, doesn't really matter where it was exactly. The point being is that this basically just kind of a prepping, fixing type of EQ. Then here we have a second compressor going, which is very likely set much more forgiving, much more subtle than the first one. I cast my pain aside. You can hear I recorded this in a pretty big room, and you hear the natural reverb bleed into the mic, right? Which is not really, don't really like that, but you know, whatever. You don't hear it that much in the final recording. Yeah, nothing too fancy going on there, just standard compression. Okay, here we have a whole bunch of stuff going on. Yeah, I'll just go through it one by one. So first of all, you have two compressors. I love these white CS modules in this plugin. They're just very musical and to the point, like, and they're kind of what's the word? Well, if you're not using looking for a very aggressive sounding EQ or something, but more something subtle, transparent, that's the word I was looking for. And these are really nice. And the reason I use two is because they simply have like a limited number of bands. So I just line up two of them. Yeah, let me just do it with and without. I cast my pain aside. It's quite subtle, right? And you can also see like this button engages the EQ or not. So apparently at some point I fooled around with adding more top end, but I turned it off because I didn't like it. So that's also why this A-B is not very drastic, because it's very small moves, not even a dB, not even a dB, just over a dB. So it's very subtle. And the reason for that is, again, to make things, to let things kind of sound natural. We didn't want it like I don't know, like an overly bright vocal or something like that, which is actually part of the reason why I use this TLM 102 mic. It's not overly bright because I kind of dislike overly bright mics. So moving on to the next one. Well, this one I showed earlier, this module on the drums, I think it just adds some air, but this also set very subtly, so I doubt you will hear much of it. I cast my pain aside. fiber on top. Yeah, so pretty subtle. I just maxed it out to see, to show you what that does. So all of this is not too exciting or too everyone with some basic knowledge can pull off that. This is probably the most interesting. Coming back to the topic of saturation, both of these are kind of like they're part of this virtual tube collection thingy in the Slate mix rack, and so they. Well, to put it very simply, they add saturation. And there's a third module in here, like this New York style thingy. Where is it? And they each have their own flavor, like these three of them. This one is very bright and aggressive and blah, blah, blah. And I love adding these type of, to anything really, but to vocals especially, and to make them come alive. So let's see what they do. And I'll exaggerate it as well so you can hear. Cast my pain aside, bear the fiber on top. My pain aside. So as you can, I don't know if you could visually see it, but on the loudest peaks, this thing kind of would really start to do a lot of work, and you see this like virtual light turn on, and I like that. When I dial in specifically for rock vocals, these type of effects, I want them to be not too subtle, and because this part is obviously the loudly sung part, and it's okay if you hear the saturation modules work there. On the beginning part, they won't do that much. If we A/B here. The concealing tapestry, I've been hiding behind my hand. I cast my pain aside, bear the fiber untouched, ram and scrap. I guess you can hear that. And so this one is set to 100%, so this is kind of the main saturator, and for whatever reason, I don't remember why, I used the second one, but I only added it in 15%. And probably because this one sounds quite different. Oh, actually, I do remember now. For some tracks, I use this one as the main saturator on my vocals, and other tracks this one. This one sounds a lot more clear and kind of... what's the word? Like crystally or something. And that was really nice for some tracks. This one sounds a lot more warm and fizzy. I'm speaking kind of like exaggerating, the difference are kind of subtle. But so for some tracks, I use this one as the main one. So in this case, I guess I just wanted a touch of the warmth and fatness that this one brings, and then only added in 15%. But I doubt you can, this really nitpicky stuff, I doubt you can hear the difference. I cast my pain aside, bear the fiber untouched, ram and scraps of fear collide, and primal root. So like I said, that was subtle, right? I use Reaper as well. We love to see how others work and navigate. Cool. Yeah, Reaper's finally, after like years and years and years of being this underdog in the market, it's kind of finally gaining some traction and being taken seriously, which is nice. I kind of stumbled upon it by coincidence. I remember we had a session recording vocals if I remember correctly. And I used Cubase or Nuendo back then, and it just at a sudden point it kept crashing on me, and I couldn't fix it. So I had heard of Reaper. I was kind of young back in the day, because this is a long time ago. And so, as a last resort, we, started working in Reaper just to record the vocals there. And I liked it so much that I completely transitioned after that. And that's back in 2006 or something. And, but yeah, they've come a long way. And every time I think I found something in Reaper that I don't like or miss or something, I kind of find out that you can work and tweak it in yourself, because it's so open to scripting and putting in like custom actions and all that type of good stuff. So yeah, at this point I'm really used to the workflow, and I also don't really miss any features really. So I like it. But having said that, like, I think all DAWs are pretty much awesome these days. There's not a big difference in. You should be able to get the job done with any of them. Okay, so the next we have a de-esser, but this one, I don't think there's much of interest to talk about here either. This might even be the stock settings, because this plugin honestly just often works with stock settings if you open it. Let's see if it does a lot. I cast my pain aside. De-essing is one of these things that's kind of personal, I think, to mixers. Some of my favorite records, if you really pay attention to it, are really aggressive on the S's, and it's clear that they didn't put any de-essers on it. And yeah, honestly, I don't really know where I stand with that. This is one of these things that's kind of hard to dial in for me, and I'm kind of like, oh, this is the ballpark. Let's go for the middle. So if I put this off and just see how bright the S's are and I'll play it actually in the context of the whole song. Yes. That would have still worked for me. You can hear it on the aside part, right? Sounds a little smoother, whatever. Okay. What does this thing do? I guess I'm looking at the automation in the background here to see how I used it, and yeah. I see the crunch, the amount of distortion is being automated in this little automation lane. Boop. So yeah, again, more saturation. And as I was saying earlier, when I was actually speaking about this plugin, this one is awesome at destroying things, but then it's cool to blend it in ever so subtly, and it very neatly has this mix knob right here to do that. And so that's what's happening here. And just for the louder parts in the song, as you can see, first chorus, second chorus, bridge, blah, blah, blah. So let's see what this sounds with and without. Oh, wrong button. I cast my pain aside, bear the fiber untouched, remnant scraps of fear collide. Just, when I'm mixing myself, I like to do that a lot as well. Well, when I put it on plugins, just throw these buttons around and push them to the max, so you really hear what it does. Not one that's very subtle with, let's do 0.1 dB to the, no, fuck that. You just grab your plugin and push these buttons and throw them out to the max, and then you just really hear what it does, and then you can dial it in a little bit more subtle. Anyways, this was kind of subtle to me, right? Like how it was used. Maybe on you can see that it's definitely has a more the automation here is dialed in quite a bit more aggressively, and that's for the screamy part that I did there in the bridge here. So let's see, let's solo that part and see what this plugin does there. I feel the rain of 1,000 hours caress my virgin flesh. I remember recording this part in my little room, being... Yeah, this one wasn't recorded in the studio, I guess. It was recorded back at home in my bedroom, and I was looking out the windows, being worried if what the neighbors were thinking. But anyway, that aside, yeah, I honestly, this one, I usually use it much more aggressively, so it's very subtle. And then here, like I said earlier, we have some song-based moves to make things sound lo-fi and whatnot. Let me just briefly talk about this one, because as I was saying earlier, I really dislike the lows in a lot of male voices, but also mine, and it's also very common for that reason. If you have like a naturally just middle or lower style male vocal, in the mixing project, to take out a lot of lows, and that's especially the case for quietly lower vocals. So maybe I can take the beginning as an example, even though I didn't sing that low there, but I did sing quietly. The concealing tapestry. Like if I put back in all the low end there, you know, like for example, I would eliminate this one. Do I take something out here? Nope. Yeah, so I guess this one's mainly done with this decapitator plugin, which is kind of a weird use for that plugin, but I'll talk about that in a second. So where do we see that? Decapitator song. Oh, wait. And there's also another EQ that filters out a lot of low end, like -12 dB at like 150. So let's also disable this and disable these. So now this quiet part here. The concealing tapestry, I've been hiding behind my angel, my shadow, my hand, but now you hear how it gets muddy very, very easily. And of course that's also part of me being close to the mic, proximity effect, blah blah blah. It just creates low muddiness. So I'm guessing I automated this EQ. Yeah, I did. So this EQ gets like turned on basically, or what does it modulate? Yeah, the wet dry. Like for people, those of you who don't know Reaper, Reaper has this wet dry control on each plugin. So even if a plugin by design cannot do wet dry, you can in Reaper, which is kind of nice, and then you can automate it. So in this case, you can see I'm blending the plugin, basically the EQ here, and with this wet dry knob. So here it's not doing anything in the chorus, and here it is taking out a lot of low end. Yeah. Okay, let's move on from that. But first, let me take a look at the chat if I see something interesting. Good to see you here, Mr. C9 Chord. Yeah, let me skip the decapitator plugin and go to the effects here, because that's probably of most interest to when talking about these vocals. I I had them turned off like all this while, right? So you might have gotten used to like a very dry sound by now, but yeah, this is what they sound like with all the effects on there. Ceiling tapestry, I've been hiding behind my angel, my friend that had. It's not overly wet, but it's also not dry. So first of all, I like parallel effects when it comes to this type of thing. When it comes to adding reverbs and delays, and this is kind of interesting to me because it's, for example, it's the completely opposite of what, for example, Devin Townsend likes to do. He likes to run, I don't remember the order, but like delay into reverb into delay, something like that. So that's very much in series. Whereas for me, they're all like parallel, stacked up here, the different types of delays and reverbs. So let's see what we have. And some of them might just be effects that get pulled up ever so, once every while. For example, you can see that here in the automation lanes, like these red spikes here, they are sent to the long delay. So this one right here, it isn't always on. It's just doing something when the automation lane here sends it something. So let me skip that one for now because it's kind of like an effect. Then we have like a thickening thing. What is ceiling tapestry, I've been hiding behind. This is something I think I learned from, what's his name? Shit, I can't think of it right now. But basically more saturation again, this time with Decapitator. It's doing quite a bit, but a lot of high end it is cut off. So if I wouldn't have cut that off, it would sound like this. Ceiling tapestry, I've been hiding behind my angel. So it's very, very filtered. And again, if you blend this in ever so subtly, it just gives more, how to describe it? It just makes the vocals sit better in the mix. It makes it sound fuller without getting more muddy to me, if that makes sense. So let me quickly do with and without. Maybe let's see if you can hear it in context of the song. You know, it's one of these things where some vocalists might not need this because they have more raspy kind of warmth in their low end of the voice, in their instrument, basically. But to me, if I turn it off, I sound more amateuristic. What's the word? Well, you get what I mean. Let's move on to the reverb. So first one is a plate, and what did we use? Hello, please don't crash. I used an impulse, and I used, what is this? From the M7, right. So there's this hardware reverb out there. What's it called? Bricasti or something? And it sounds awesome. And I just happened to find like a library of impulses that someone made of the unit, and that's what I loaded here. So I often like to combine a bunch of different types of reverbs on voices, and when it comes to delays and well, especially reverbs and singing voices, it really for me differs from voice to voice what I might end up using. For some, the style of reverb, I mean, for some, a plate, for example, sounds great on most singers, I would argue. But for some reason it doesn't on other singers. You know, you pull up the reverb and for example, this same reverb that might have sounded great on one singer, you put it on another singer and it sounds like he's in a bathroom somewhere and it's just ugly. You know, that happens. So it's always kind of like a little bit of trial and error and see what works. Anyway, so this reverb alone very nice. It's just smooth and blending in there very nicely. Then we have a room, and that's probably Valhalla. Yes, it is. Valhalla has some really good reverbs. They've been getting a lot of recognition, I think, from mixers the past years. They have a bunch of different ones, like Shimmer. Maybe we'll find one of those later in the session. It's really nice for guitar as well if you want those kind of crystally, shimmery reverbs. They also have a plate, but for some reason, for example, I don't like their plate too much. It ends up sounding bathroomy, like I just said. This room, though, I really like. And it sounds like this. And when I dial these things in, I usually try to really make sure that they are really doing something different. And what I mean by that is that this one is like set to 3.4 seconds, for example. I doubt the other one, well, the other one was an impulse, so it has a set length. But if I would dial it in manually, I would make sure that you kind of get the idea of like a smaller space and a larger space, and or however you want to put it, or whatever it does in the project, but make sure that they each are responsible for their own thing, right? Because otherwise it doesn't make any sense to use multiple reverbs, or any effect for that matter. Yeah, is there anything else that is of interest here? Well, so that's the only reverb I use on the vocal. There's some delay and blah, blah, blah. But what might be interesting is if we go, this in Reaper, if you right mouse click on the volume slider, you get into this little, well, dialogue of, or how you call this little panel where you can set sends and receives for the track and all that good stuff. But you can also set the width. And as you can see, it's only set to 40% on the plate, and on the room, it's to 100%. And that is something I do very frequently. Also, for vocals and plate reverbs, I do it a lot. And it comes back for drums and snare. If I would use artificial reverb on a snare, it would highly likely also be a plate, and it would very likely also be the width would be trimmed a little bit, and that is to make the effect blend in better with the source of the sound, basically. Because if you have a vocal that is just panned to the middle, like it is here, and you have your reverb that is too wide, then it just ends up being kind of distracting, and the effect falls kind of out of its place to me. So I kind of like to make it a little bit more narrow. Maybe I can actually show you this.
Stray, I've been hiding behind my angel, my friend that have you even how my love, my shadow, my hand, but now your ragged seams give in.
I exaggerated and put it very loudly, right? But I think you get the point. Like, and it might be tempting with these type of effects to think like, oh, the wider, the bigger, the better. But Yeah, no, not always, I think. So what else do we have? We have some delay. Oh, wait, you didn't hear me speak, of course, because I made the same mistake as before. So where was I? Yeah. Mike, muted. Yeah. So with delays, it's nice if you don't hear every repeat like super obviously, because that just sounds kind of annoying. And for that reason, people like, for example, to throw their delay into a reverb again to soften the repeats. But I prefer to do this, kind of take a lot of high end out of it, and that just makes it more subtle in the background type of thing. Other than that, nothing special going on there. It's tempo sync to the project and then quarter note. And then we've got a subtle doubling effect. Oh, I'm guessing this one is automated to be only audible in certain moments. Yeah, like the chorus. And this is kind of done to overcome the thing of, the decision to only use one vocal does have its downside in that it, sounds a little bit smaller, up and downside in this case. But for the chorus, I did want a little bit more width, and so that's done artificially with this micro shift plugin. If I put it a little louder, you can hear more clearly what it does. It makes it sound very stereo-y. And if you put it too loud, then it makes it sound kind of cheap to me. It sounds like a chorus and kind of ugly. But if you use it very subtly, it can be really nice. Yeah, let's try it in the context of the whole mix. But you notice and you see how subtle I did use it, right? Like even lower than it is set now. So this is really one of these things where, like I said earlier, I don't remember where, but if you're used to how it sounds with it, and then you mute it, you hear that it just sounds less good than it did before. So yeah, subtle but nice. And I guess that's pretty much the gist of the whole vocals. Well, there's backing vocals going on, but they are kind of treated very similarly, even though it's Robin singing. But can show you a little part here.
I cast my pain aside, bear the fiber untouched. Remnant scraps of fear collide, and primal roots shine in the hush.
Interesting part, right? It's very hovers a lot around one note, and I guess that's just how the part was written also, like harmonically. But yeah, works nicely together. That was cool anyways on this record to have Robin do the backings instead of myself. Just creates a little bit more flavor and texture to have different voices complementing each other instead of hearing choirs and layers by just one vocalist. Is there anything else we might want to do? Well, it's already 4:30, so I guess we've been going for quite a bit already. Let me take a look around, and in the meantime, if you guys do have some specific questions or things you want me to show you, both in plugins and maybe you want to listen to something in solo or something, then let me know in the chat. And like I said, I'll also take a look around here. In the meantime, I'll talk a little bit about guitars, because why not? So the main guitar of this, well, is that the main guitar? The majority of the guitars are somewhat cleanish, Fenderish type sounds. I did use 2 tracks for them, but those are the same performances. They're just reamped through different settings in the XFX2. This is a Vibroverb model of a Fender amp, and this is a Bassman. This is the difference. And I treated them, they each have their own function, I guess. Yeah, I still love this sound. Like the XFX so good at these Fenderish type amp models. It's one of the things that I cannot really find a good plugin for, and I've tried them all. Anyhow, so in this case, this is kind of the main sound, and it's also treated like not too there's not too much reverb or anything on there. There's not even any reverb on there. And then this Bassman, it's panned all the way to the right, I guess, even though it says left here. I probably did some funky routing. And then I threw that into a spring reverb. Okay. Like I said earlier, I haven't opened this project a month, so it's I'm rediscovering what I did here. Yeah, it's just trickery to, you know, whenever you have like a single guitar part like that for kind of a main event like the chorus and also the verses and pre-choruses in this case. Again, this was like a very conscious choice to keep things kind of simple and intimate, you know, to not double track these parts. But it does present you with the challenge of making it sound a little bit bigger. Instead of this tiny little mono part in the song. So there's all kinds of things you can do, of course. And in this case, this is a trick I guess I used all over the place, but it's the part itself. Well, first of all, it's reamped through a different amp, so it has a little bit of a different frequency response as the main part. That already, if you pan it, then introduces some stereo-ness, but very subtle. But then also, I sent this one to this spring reverb, which I love, like this spring reverb specifically from PSP. Really nice. There are not a lot of good spring reverb plugins out there, but this one, I use it all the time. And especially paired with Fender type sounds, it sounds really good. So the drive signal is panned 100%. And the reverb is panned 50%. to the other side, and then you can, and then if you pair that with the original sound, you can, you kind of get something that is a little bit wider and more spacious than if I wouldn't have done this trickery. It's again one of these things that if you don't know and you hear it without muting it, it sounds almost like mono, and then you mute those trickery tracks, and then it sounds a lot more mono than you would have thought. You know what I mean? Yeah, anyway. So let me take a look at the chat again. Would love to hear this. Will it be available after the stream? Yeah, I think so. I think I can just, it's the first time I'm doing this, but you see like live recorded videos on YouTube all the time. So I guess it's either a choice I have in a little bit when I close this up, that I keep it, or maybe it's automatic even. I don't know. We'll see. Pitch shift Robin's vocals so they match yours. Oh, that's my little brother who says that. But that's sung pretty highly, like that part's almost mine. It's quite late to the party, says Satyam. Well, as Yuma said, you can watch it back later. Big fan from the Exvius days. Well, thank you. And I'll do some Exvius later, even though those mixes might be a little bit less interesting, from my perspective at least. So I think I'll keep it at this because we've already been going for 1.5 hours. I know this was kind of, I kind of have to learn to pick a good balance between detail and the amount of different information I talk about. And it's tempting to just want to go really into the details of one track and just show that. But if I would do that, then I would have only covered the kick track in 1.5 hours, right? So I guess I have to kind of see where the balance has to sit on that. So again, like this was my first attempt here, and I'll try some more soon. I also want to do some different bands I mixed. Other than our own material. And yeah, hopefully as I keep doing this, I'll figure out a formula to get a good balance between detail and the amount of stuff we're talking about here. And hopefully this was somewhat interesting for you guys. And also, hopefully everything was all right sound-wise, because of course I'm talking about mixing here, but I cannot really tell if it captured okay. So I hope so. Yeah, so let's keep it at this. And thank you for tuning in, and see you next time. And now, after saying goodbye, I very slowly have to search for the stop button. Where is it? End stream. Here. Bye.